And similar development has taken place in other parts of East Asia. And this means that simply because of their inability to stimulate domestic demand, they've been pushing out what they can consume and they can use for investment to foreign markets and foreign consumers and investors. And then looking at the China's the trade the statistics, there has been a surprising development. China has been able to absorb lots of exports from East Asian countries, and the countries like Japan, Korea, and other countries have benefited a great deal from rapid growth in China. And China has grew by more than 9%, maybe when they come to the actual statistics figures, the growth rate may even close to 10%. And in the process, they have imported a great deal, and then that has helped the neighboring countries a great deal. Now, the second question is the old question of whether East Asia is decoupling from the cyclical developments of the rest of the world, that is the cyclical developments in Europe and the United States. And many studies had shown before the crisis, in fact, the decoupling was taking root in East Asia. But then the story has changed a great deal since the outbreak of the crisis. One question is whether China is going to be able to substitute the United States and Europe as a regional engine of growth in East Asia. Well, I'm not sure. There are pieces of evidence suggesting yes, and there are other pieces saying no, so that I'm not in a position to make any kind of the judgment. But then Japan has been a disappointment. It hasn't been able to grow, although it is the second largest economy, and it is suffering from a deflation, and so that there is this negative factor development. And then at the same time, the actual increase in intra-regional trade, especially the vertical type, not vertical, but horizontal type of intra-regional trade, I don't think has increased as much as a proportion of the total trade. So that we have mixed pieces of evidence suggesting whether the East Asia can develop as a rather independent region, less immune to the external shocks coming from Europe and the United States. And then again, I'll have to do more work on this. And if you look at this, the export growth in East Asia, well, the rate of growth of export has entered the positive territory beginning around the third quarter of the 2009, and then even in the case of China, the export is growing faster than expected and faster than before. And then imports, again, just look at this, the green line, and just look at the massive increase in the high rate of growth of Chinese imports. And China, as I said before, China is importing a lot from Korea and other countries, neighboring countries, so that has contributed to the recovery of East Asia as a great deal. And then GDP growth rates. And obviously you can see that rather the sharp V-shaped recovery is taking place. And contrary to the early expectations, the Korea, Singapore have grown. In fact, last year they posted the positive rate of growth. It's too early to say last year, but I mean, in 2009, the rate of growth was the positive in both countries. And in Indonesia, China, they have maintained relatively high rate of growth. And then other countries, other smaller countries still remain in a negative territory, but then their prospects are relatively optimistic and relatively promising next year. Well, the question is now entering to discussing each country. What about China? Now, the Chinese authorities are very confident about their ability to sustain rapid growth very close to the 5 minutes, not the 5%. It's almost 8 to 9%. And if they see slack in the economic growth, they are prepared to inject more fiscal money into the economy to sustain a rapid growth rate. And my question is whether they can continue to do so, but then they think they can, and then they will. And Japan is a rather disappointing development, and now the problem is deflation, and they have practically run out of any short-run the anti-cyclical policy instruments to use. And what about the other Asian newly industrial economies? They've been hit harder than the countries in East Asia simply because of number of structural characteristics. One, the export dependence is pointed out as a major cause of their decline in economic activities. Well, not necessarily. My study shows that it is not that as important as what is often made out to be, because if you look at the Netherlands, the export GDP ratio is almost more than 60%, and nobody is going to tell you that the Netherlands is a country that will need restructure the economy to depend more on domestic demand. So the export dependence is not as as important as it is made out to be. But what about the export push growth strategy? In other words, that if a country has a biased incentive scheme in favor of exports and against non-tradables, and these countries tend to suffer more than the countries which has rather neutral incentive scheme. And then what about the high degree of openness of financial markets? Well, yes, these countries tend to be more susceptible to external shocks, especially financial shocks. And flexibility of the exchange rate, well, many countries have in fact adopted a more flexible exchange rate system. But then the flexibility has much to do with the country's susceptibility to the foreign, the external financial crisis. It doesn't serve as a buffer. And in fact, in a bank run situation, it can exacerbate the crisis. This is the experience the Korea had last year. What about the short run, the crisis management? Well, as you can imagine, all of these countries cut their interest rates, cut their taxes, and expanded government expenditure on all kinds of projects, ranging from the construction of the physical infrastructure to protection of the environment. But again, according to some of the studies, preliminary studies suggest that the fiscal policy multipliers have been rather very, very small. In some cases, less than 1. And I'm not saying the fiscal policy has not been effective, but then fiscal policy is not as effective it is often known to be. And more importantly, because of the low fiscal policy multiplier, the fiscal spending does not stimulate the consumption and domestic demand. That is, does not set up the so-called multiplier accelerator, the prices. But then at the same time, they can continue with the fiscal policy, to boost domestic demand? No, because they will have to worry about debt accumulation and the fiscal sustainability. And the moment the external lenders and the investors see substantial increase in the fiscal deficits, well, they are going to increase their lending rates to these countries. The spread will go up. And so what if the fiscal policy doesn't work, and we all know that monetary policy hasn't been very effective anywhere in the world, and that what they should do, just in case they cannot export to the United States and to Europe and other parts of the world,